Okay, from the diary of Anne Frank, hope, isolation, and humorous resilience. Let's dive right into this incredible explainer. Today, we're looking at a deeply intimate account of a brilliant teenager who used nothing more than a simple notebook and honestly a razor-sharp wit to navigate intense emotional isolation and rigid authoritarian adults. Now, when we think of Anne Frank, we almost always immediately think of the heavy, heartbreaking historical context of World War II. But for this explainer, we're zooming in on her vibrant, highly relatable life just before she went into hiding. It is an absolute masterclass in how creativity can literally help us survive emotionally restrictive environments.
Paper has more patience than people. We're going to anchor today's whole exploration on this exact quote. Think about that for a second. It's a remarkably profound statement for a 13-year-old to make, right? And it poses this fascinating question that we really need to unpack together. Why would someone who is seemingly surrounded by friends and family feel the overwhelming need to confide in a blank page? Like, what is it about paper that offers a solace that human beings simply can't provide?
Well, looking at this breakdown of her physical versus emotional setting, what's really fascinating here is the stark contrast. On the physical side, she's living in Amsterdam, attending the Jewish Lyceum, surrounded by about 30 acquaintances, plus she has loving parents and a sister. From the outside, it looks like a completely normal, vibrant teenage life full of everyday school jitters and chatter. But then, if you look deeper at the emotional side, she's actually experiencing overwhelming isolation. Despite being in a crowded room, she feels profoundly alone. She has friends for having fun, sure, but she totally lacks that empathetic, absolute friend to share her unfiltered, deepest self with.
So, to understand how she manages to bridge this massive gap between her physical and emotional worlds, we've got to introduce the dynamic trio at the center of our narrative. First up, we have Anne herself, our introspective, highly intelligent 13-year-old protagonist. Then there's her strict, old-school math teacher, Mr. Keesing, who basically represents all the rigid adult authority in her life. And finally, there's Kitty. But here's the twist. Kitty isn't a human classmate at all. No way. Kitty is her personified diary. To Anne, Kitty isn't just a book. She is the true best friend she had been so desperately searching for.
Which brings us right back to why she chose a paper confidant. Patience. It's the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without anger or upset. Paper doesn't interrupt you mid-sentence. It doesn't roll its eyes, it doesn't pass judgment, and it certainly doesn't go gossiping to the rest of the school. Kitty simply absorbs Anne's innermost secrets with this kind of unwavering, unconditional patience. In a world completely dominated by social pressures and adult expectations, Kitty is her totally safe space.
Let's take a quick second and think back to your own school days. Have you ever felt entirely anxious about what unpredictable teachers might do with your final grades? Because Anne's diary connects her 1940s experience directly to that very modern, very real teenage anxiety. She writes so vividly about the intense anticipation her entire class felt while waiting for the upcoming parent-teacher meetings. The classroom was literally thick with tension. Students were actually making bets with their pocket money on who was going to pass to the next grade and who was going to be held back.
Unpredictable creatures. I love this. The crucial point here is how she coped with all that anxiety. Instead of just panicking like everyone else, she humorously categorized her teachers as the most unpredictable creatures on Earth. And honestly, it's a brilliant coping mechanism. By labeling them as these unpredictable creatures whose grading systems are just impossible to forecast, she kind of strips away some of their intimidating power. It really highlights her mature outlook and how she used humor to manage the insane stress of academic life.
And that anxiety perfectly sets the stage for what becomes a legendary classroom conflict. You see, Anne was naturally talkative. She was just brimming with youthful vitality. But Mr. Keesing, her old-fashioned math teacher, he found this chattiness deeply, deeply irritating. What unfolds is a hilarious escalation driven by a student's natural desire to express herself, clashing with a teacher who is absolutely determined to suppress it using traditional classroom punishments.
We can actually trace this escalating battle of wits chronologically on this timeline. We start at day 1, with Anne seeking a true friend to cure her isolation, establishing her voice in Kitty. As the school year progresses, we hit day 15, dealing with the anxiety of the class verdict and grades. But the real friction, the real fireworks, hit around our metaphorical day 30, when her constant talking leads to the infamous chatterbox essays. This timeline isn't just a list of events. It traces a total battle of endurance that ultimately leads to her winning the joke by day 45 and completely transforming her environment.
Let's look a little closer at that specific punishment. Incorrigible. Mr. Keesing viewed Anne's constant talking as an incorrigible habit, meaning something impossible to correct, cure, or improve. He didn't just tell her to be quiet. He went a step further and assigned her extra homework to write a whole essay on the subject, a chatterbox. It was clearly meant to be this tedious, embarrassing punishment to publicly cure her of this supposedly incorrigible flaw.
But check out this breakdown of the punishment versus N's clever defense. This brilliantly illustrates her highly analytical mind. Instead of just writing some boring apology, she mounted a full-on clever defense. For the first essay, she argued that talking is simply a natural trait of a student. You can't fight nature. Then, when Mr. Keesing assigned a second essay as punishment for talking again, she humorously claimed she inherited the habit from her mother. She essentially argued, hey, there is very little one can do about inherited biological traits. She used these clever, almost legalistic arguments right under pressure to completely outsmart her teacher.
Quacking? Yep, like a duck. The punishments did not stop there. They escalated to a third essay. This time, Mr. Keesing, really trying to get the upper hand and embarrass her in front of the whole class, titled it, "Quack, Quack, Quack, Said Mistress Chatterbox." He was metaphorically comparing her student chatter to the mindless quacking of ducks, totally mocking her natural, youthful vitality. He wanted to make her the punchline of the joke.
The satirical masterpiece. Faced with this third essay, Anne absolutely refused to lose heart. Instead, she penned what can only be described as a satirical masterpiece. She wrote a poem about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 baby ducklings. And in this poem, the baby ducklings quack too much. So, what is the father's response? He literally bites them to death as a punishment. Wow. It is a dark, brilliant parody of rigid authoritarianism, and it perfectly reflected exactly how Mr. Keesing was trying to violently suppress her natural instinct to communicate.
Now, you'd probably expect a strict 1940s math teacher to just be furious at this level of defiance, right? I mean, she wrote a poem about him biting kids. But here is the beautiful twist. Mr. Keesing reads the poem, recognizes the sheer intelligence and wit behind it, and he actually takes the joke beautifully. He reads it aloud to the class, adds his own comments, and he stops punishing her entirely. We literally get to see this profound evolution from a rigid teacher to an understanding mentor who finally appreciates her incredible mind.
So, main theme, the need to confide, versus sub-theme, freedom of teen expression. When we step back and look at the big picture, this entire explainer reveals 2 massive themes. The main theme is our fundamental human need to confide in something or someone. Anne's writing was a crucial therapeutic tool. It proves that creative self-expression is absolutely essential for our mental sanity, especially when we find ourselves in restrictive environments. And the sub-theme? The freedom of teen expression. It shows that natural youth vitality simply cannot, and really shouldn't, be rigidly suppressed by authoritarian methods.
And that brings us to these modern life lessons, which are totally timeless. First up, the value of humility. Mr. Keesing showed us that humor and creativity can actually dissolve deep conflict and build healthy, mutually respectful relationships. Second, the art of self-expression. Journaling channels all that anxious, isolated energy into something incredibly productive. And finally, empathy and authority. Teachers, parents, leaders, we all have to learn to harness natural traits, even the slightly annoying ones like talkativeness, rather than blindly trying to suppress them.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this one thought. Anne Frank showed us that even when we are totally surrounded by people, we can still feel entirely alone. So when you feel isolated or misunderstood or just trapped by the expectations around you, how can journaling and creative art guide you through your own emotional loneliness? Because honestly, maybe we could all benefit